Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. I'm your host, Marianne, and today we're going to take a pretty popular topic and turn it on its corner. Joining me for that conversation is Holly Bertone. Holly is a transformational mindset coach, meditation facilitator, motivational speaker, #1 Amazon bestselling author, and the host of Gratitude Builds Fortitude podcast. Holly spent 20 years rising through the ranks of federal government service until a breast cancer and autoimmune diagnosis created an opportunity, and yes, I did say opportunity, to combine her background in project management and analytics with solving a different set of problems. These days, though, she's known as the go-to coach and speaker to help you unlock your comeback story in the face of adversity, build mental resilience, and find more happiness. Holly's been featured on over 250 TV and radio segments, articles, podcasts, physical stages, and online summits as an expert on gratitude and mindset, including CBS and Huffington Post. Holly, thank you so much for being here with me today. Before we shake things up a bit and talk about some common beliefs about gratitude that maybe you're going to twist up a little bit, can you share your background with us and let the folks know how you sort of got into this work?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much, Marianne, for having me on this show. And before I start with my background, I do want to say, I always like to start with, everyone has their preconceived notion of gratitude, whether it's, I'm going to make a list of 3 things, or it's this just pie in the sky, airy, fairy, cloudy kind of thing that's out there, or, gratitude's kind of baloney pants or whatever. We all come into this, or I do my gratitudes every day. Like, we all come into it with our own preconceived notions. So if you're listening, I really want you to be present to what you currently think about gratitude. Because what I like to do is say, we are going to flip that upside down. And you're going to walk away from this episode saying, wow, I never knew gratitude could do that. And I'm looking at this in a whole different way. So if that's you, if you're a little skeptical or a lot skeptical, I just want you to say, keep listening. We're going to have fun today.
Well, and if you're not skeptical, keep listening because you might still learn something that can add to what you're already doing. So yeah, thanks for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I help women to really create their comeback story during those times of adversity in their life. And this was a very intentional decision because I was that person who was the overachiever. I was successful in everything that I did. I was the chief of staff for one of those 3-letter federal government agencies they make TV shows about. And so I was at the top of my career. I raced in Xterra races, mountain bike races, stand on a podium, get a medal around my neck. I'd travel all over the world and drink margaritas with my girlfriends. And that's what I thought in, my 30s was the perfect life. Like that's, when I was in college and I was in my 20s, I was like, this is what I want my life to look like. And it looked like it. And I was like, this is it. And everything changed. On my 39th birthday, I got the phone call. And the doctor on the other end said, Holly, I'm calling to let you know that the test results came back. And I'm sorry to let you know, but you have breast cancer.
Wow. Mic drop. Wow.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
He also said, don't worry, it's the good kind, which that's a whole other podcast episode.
Yeah. Is there a good time?
Medical gaslighting. And then he's like, go get a surgeon and good luck. And I was like, okay, my world
shattered, I bet.
It becomes before and after.
Yeah.
It is a huge line that gets drawn in your life. It could be breast cancer. It could be any kind of tragic event or anything. Mine was breast cancer at that moment in time, which drew that huge line. Life was before, and then life was now breast cancer. But so I went through the surgery, chemo, radiation. But what happened was I never got better. Like I kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And the doctors are like, oh, it's going to take you time to recover. I'm like, do you understand? Like last year, this time I was standing on a podium. Like there's something wrong with me. There's something that's not right. So I fought for my health and I advocated for myself. And finally, they discovered that I had Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune condition. And that is basically a slow and sluggish thyroid. So, a lot of people experience weight gain and debilitating chronic fatigue. So those are the two big side effects. And I remember like, oh, my doctor's going to give me a pill and I'm going to feel better. Like tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be normal again. And I'm going to be Holly again.
Yeah, not so much.
Not so much. That didn't happen. But what happened was over the years, the debilitating chronic fatigue got worse to the point where I could barely function, to the point where the new management team came in at work and decided to illegally rescind my legally approved FMLA. And I was basically forced to resign.
Wow.
So at that point, I was at rock bottom number 3.
Wow.
And that was when I couldn't get out of bed. I was so exhausted. I had a husband and a stepson, and I was like, I can't take care of myself. I can't take care of my family. And I decided to marinate in my own misery because that's, I think, a very natural human reaction to being in that place where my entire identity was taken away from me, from being successful, from doing all the things, being a wife and a mother and successful career woman. Everything was taken away. And that
all
was
at once.
All at once. And that was rock bottom. And that felt like I've failed before, but that level of failure was different than anything I had ever experienced.
Well, in your brain, that level of failure, because we know it's really not failure, right? But yeah, right. In your brain at that time, wow, that's a lot. I'm sorry you went through all that.
Oh, I'm glad I did.
Well, we're going to talk about that, right?
We're going to talk about
in the moment, I'm sure you weren't glad.
Oh, in the moment. Oh, no.
Hey, before we go on, I do want to you said something that I think is worth noting for people. You listened to your intuition when you started getting sick, right? And I think a lot of us, especially women, we let those doctors and those professionals sort of brush us off, and we may know there's something wrong with us. And I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but you did mention it. And I just feel like it's worth saying that out loud, because as women, as anybody, you really have to know your body and really advocate for your health.
Absolutely.
Especially in the systems these days.
And it's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of my students in my training course, the Gratitude Lab, she came in because of, her condition. And she's like, I don't want to have this define me. And I want to live in a place of gratitude. And what happened was she ended up learning how to act, like just as the ripple effect. And she learned how to advocate for herself. She would go into her doctor's appointment scared to death. She hated the doctor. She was scared to death. She did exactly what they told her to do, even if it's what she did not want to do. And she actually learned how to advocate for herself and stand up for herself and say, no, this is my body and this is how I want to proceed with her condition.
That's awesome.
So it is extremely important to advocate for yourself, to find your voice, to partner with your doctors. And if your doctor is not taking your thoughts and your opinion into consideration, it's time for a new doctor.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So you had all that trauma and hit rock bottom times 3.
Because that's what overachievers do. We don't hit rock bottom once. It's got to be 3 times.
Valid. So valid.
Quintessential overachiever. Yeah. Nailed
it. Check. Oh, man. So, all right, you're right. Natural reaction. You're wallowing in that misery a little bit, which we've all done. What wakes you up?
Really what it was, I don't think it was one pivotal moment. I know so many people are like, oh, this happened and the, skies opened up. Really what it was me in that place of marinating in my own misery and deciding I don't want my life to be like this. I was at that point, 40 years old, and, married and stepson. And, I had an awesome life. So I need to figure out, regardless of whether I get better or not, I need to figure out how to have an amazing life, even under these circumstances.
Mm.
And what happened was my mother's life mantra growing up every single day, I always heard her say, it builds fortitude. And I always thought, like, every single day of her life, it was her life mantra. And I always thought that it meant the staying strong, and when I was going through all my health challenges, that's what I did. I stayed strong and stayed positive. And, I felt that that's what it was, kind of that forced positivity. And what I realized when I really started to think about that and think about her legacy and unpack what that meant for me, I realized that it was her grateful heart that was the it. It was the gratitude that builds fortitude. And that's when I started to, number one, I made a decision that I'm going to take radical responsibility for my health and for my life. So that was number one. And as they say, when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah.
And I had two very beautiful souls come into my life to help me on my journey. But part of it was my own self-discovery. And I realized I started to get into the science and the psychoneuroimmunology and the neuroplasticity of gratitude. And I'm like, wait, this gratitude thing, it's got some chops. Like, it's not just, make a list of 3 things, which I thought I was doing. And I was like, I'm being grateful. I'm making a list of 3 things. And I was like, no, this actually has some chops. Like, gratitude can change your entire being. Every single cell in your body can change because of gratitude. So it's not just, I'm grateful. It literally changes the chemistry in your body.
So before we dig into that a little bit further, I also want to know, I did hear a pivotal moment in there. It maybe was the first time that mindset really showed up for you, because when you were wallowing in that misery, you did have a moment where you made a decision. You made your mind up that you weren't going to let this take your life and you were going to really get in control of it. For me, that was the first sign of doing the mindset work and really digging in there. So again, I like to pull things out for people because that's sort of a normal thing we'd probably not even think about. But those normal things are our signs that we need to lean into and really recognize what's going on in our life. So that was it. That was the shift in your path, I think. So gratitude has become your thing. You're all about gratitude. You're known everywhere for gratitude and talking about gratitude. I want to dig into this bold statement you've been making and really let folks think about things a little differently. So you've taken the position that gratitude is dead.
Yeah.
Dead is a strong word. It's a strong description. So explain that position.
And I say that tongue in cheek because it gets people's attention.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
So I do say it tongue in cheek. And basically it's because, going right back to what I talked about at the very beginning of the episode, that we are programmed to view gratitude as a list of 3 things. I'm grateful for my house, my spouse, my kids, my dog, which I guess is 4 things. But like, that's how we're programmed. We read an article and you have this little blurb and it's like, be grateful, have a journal, write your gratitudes down. And then the experts just put this out there flippantly and then they walk away and they leave it. And you're like, okay, I've got, kids that are going through their stuff, one's in braces, one's in college, my parents are aging. My, sister's got this thing. The church needs this thing. My husband's got the thing. Like, all of this stress is going on in our lives. Right. And we're like, okay, I make a list and I might feel good for a second, but I'm not grateful, and then we look around, we go on Facebook or just look around, and our perception is that everyone else is all happy and gratitudey and living their best lives. And we're like, I want to be happy too.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to say that gratitude is dead. And again, I say it tongue in cheek. It's because that's how we have been programmed to view gratitude, not understanding the science of how it works and how it can change literally the entire chemistry in our body. Can we get into the cycle, or did you want to jump into something else?
Go ahead. I was just going to ask you that. Let's dig into that. Like, let's dig into the science and the cycle of it. Let's do it.
Yeah. So I like to call it the suffer cycle. And really, it's a choice. When this happens, we have a choice as to which cycle we want to go into. And typically what happens is that event happens, or it's the iceberg of all of the events kind of coming up, and we're in that feels. And typically what happens is that we start to ruminate, and it's all we think about. So we think about it all the time. We talk to our spouse and our partner and our friends and just like constantly talking about it. And then it's what we think about before we go to bed at night. It's the first thing we think about when we wake up in the morning. Like it is the big, ugly, scary monster under the bed, and rightfully so. Like whatever that event is, or the collective events, or life in general, right? Like we're dealing with it. But what happens is that it doesn't stop there. And this is when the cycle continues. And what happens next is that we start to view this from the perspective of our body going into your body's got the autonomic nervous system, your parasympathetic, which is your peace state, your rest and digest, or your sympathetic, which is your stress state, your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So what does this look like? Well, this is our body talking to us. Our body is having a conversation with us. But again, things that we don't learn in ninth grade, how to listen to our bodies when it's talking to us. Like, what does that even mean?
Right.
Well, our body has a conversation by things like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. All of a sudden, we start to just get angrier. We start to say things that we later regret, or we start giving people the silent treatment.
Yeah.
Or we start fidgeting.
Yes.
Or we start to people please. Like we're always saying yes. Or if we say no, we feel really guilty about saying no. Or we self-sabotage. Like we see something, and so we just shut it down before it even has time to run its course.
Because it could never work out.
Right. Or we do things like go into the overachieving and the perfectionism. We basically go into the excess. So, and when I say excess, I mean the normal things in life we view in excess, like working, food, alcohol, exercise, even hobbies, right? If you're using a hobby as a way to remove yourself or to numb what's going on, right? It's not a fun hobby anymore. It's a stress response.
Yes.
So this is our body talking to us. When we do these things, when we recognize these things, we're like, oh, okay, maybe it's time to start shifting things. But what happens is that we don't recognize this. We're not taught these things. So then the suffer cycle gets worse. And then it becomes things like, oh, I have the anxiety or the depression. And then what happens is that it owns us. It becomes our identity and it owns us. So now it's my anxiety, my depression, and it owns us. It becomes my migraines and it owns us, right? My IBS and it owns us, right?
Yes.
And then it becomes a disease state. If we let it go too long, it becomes a disease state. And then that disease state owns us. My cancer, my fibromyalgia, my autoimmune disease, my diabetes. And then that owns us.
Or my obesity or my overworking, right?
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be really, it could be a disease, but also those other things can own you too.
Yes. And it becomes your identity and it owns you. And then that's when your body is screaming at you and you're like, oh, I'm sorry. Something's going on here. Right. So we wait too long for this wake up call when it could have been at the very beginning. Yeah. That is when we have a choice every single second of every single day.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, right? If we can allow ourselves, like these emotions are there, this event is happening, to sit in the emotions, to feel the emotions, to let ourselves do the natural things that our body wants us to do. But then at some point it's like, okay, I have a choice. I can either be in the state of everything is a problem. Our amygdala hijacks our brain. We no longer make decisions from a logical perspective, and we make it from a survival perspective, right? When we are being chased by the bear, the only thing our brain wants us to do is to run as fast as we can and to look for something like, a place to hide or a place to go where the bear's not going to get us.
Yeah.
Right. We are not stopping and oh, look at the pretty cloud patterns. We're not stopping and picking flowers. We are running as fast as we can from the bear. It is how we are wired to stay alive.
Yeah.
So when we're in that state, we're not making good decisions, right? So again, we could either be in that problem state, or we can choose to be in the state of solutions. We can look at it from a place of woe is me and why me, or we can look at it from a place of, we're coming up on November and thankful, grateful, blessed. And, it's like a throw pillow at TJ Maxx, but we can look at it from a place of, am I thankful? Am I thankful for the lessons that I get to learn, for the gifts that I get to experience, even though this crappy event is going on, this devastating event is going on. I can't change the fact that this devastating event is happening, but I can change my reaction.
I love that.
And then that's what brings us to that place of real, true gratitude, and gratitude becoming who we are. So it's not a list. The list is not going to do anything for you. But when you can experience gratitude, when you can actually feel it and it becomes a part of you, that's what your cells are consuming. Marianne, if I were to ask you, if I say, I have 2 cups, I have 2 glasses. One glass is filled with vitality. The other glass is filled with poison. Which glass are you going to drink?
Vitality.
Really? You're not even thinking about poison?
No, I think I'm going to have to pass on the poison.
No. But that's what we do with our minds every single day.
Yeah.
Is that we let that poison in.
Yeah.
And it's the inner dialogue. It's you have the external stuff going on that you may or may not have control over. And a lot of times we don't have control over the external stuff, but we have control over which glass we drink every single day.
It's so simple, yet it can be so challenging.
100%.
Right.
And can I just tell you, I'm not preaching. Like I was front of the line in the suffer cycle, marinating in my own misery over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. So you've been there. You get it. Yeah. And myself also, I think what really resonated with me, a couple things is, I think most of us, I guess we don't know till we know. I'm not sure how I want to say it, but I think the excess, right? I love how you described it can be anything in excess. For me, it was definitely work. And I've also had issues with my weight, and it was the food that those 2 things became my hiding place, right? I know now, right? I mean, I've done a ton of work myself and I know now, but gosh, when I look back, I didn't know. And you're right. It owns you. I became like the superstar at work. And instead of just building a career or it being my job, it became my complete identity because I needed to put my head in the sand and not recognize other things. So I think the key that I want people to hear you say and realize is the first step is noticing.
Yes.
Noticing those things that are taking over your life, that you do in excess, that are over the top.
Right.
Because that's a sign. That's really a sign that you should just really think about.
Yes.
And then you can start to make the shift and really start to take action and live in the gratitude. And it really does change your life.
It does.
It really does change your life.
And I don't know about you, I'd rather be owned by gratitude.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
And I missed a very important point that I wanted to touch on. When we are in that place of gratitude, it turns on, I call the happy hormone squad, the dopamine, the serotonin, the oxytocin, and the dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, and oxytocin. Like that's what I want.
Yes.
Right. Like that's what I want owning me, or the
fill
happy
me up.
hormones, the gratitude, the joy, the love, Marianne, let me ask you this, right? You said in a few episodes ago, you said your word of the year was joy.
Yeah. Joy and fun. Bring more of it into my life. Yeah.
Joy and fun. So did you notice a shift when that started to become your identity?
A gazillion percent. A gazillion percent. And I was just going to say, I've also noticed the gratitude thing. Like I noticed just a couple of days ago when I walked out my front porch and I came off the farmer's porch and there was a single rose on my rose bush. And what I thought about, yes, it was pretty, but what I thought about is for years, I probably walked by that rose and I never noticed.
Yeah.
And I was grateful for it in that moment. I'm like, oh, it's so pretty, like just silly little things, but it's a natural thing now. And for fun, yeah, you're right. I have a lot more fun. I'm open to more fun, being silly and joyous over things, even when there's stuff going on, because there's always stuff going on. But I think it's you train yourself to recognize it and to lean into it more, to cultivate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I had, talk about gifts. I went through a divorce last year and I had the gift of putting all of this to the test. And you know how when you're stressed or you go through something and then you always get sick right afterwards,
Yes.
like it's just because your immune
Come down.
system's down, right? So I was like, okay, this is the methodology and everything that I've learned to, get on the other side of healing myself, to have a life, to, teach my students and coach my clients. Like this has now become the whole podcast, Gratitude Builds Fortitude. Like it's
everything. It's your life.
It's my entire life. So now I'm staring at the divorce like, okay, girl, put on your big girl pants and practice what you preach. And I was like, okay. Because, after you get to the other side, like, and life is either good or neutral. You're like, okay, it's easy to be grateful when things are going well.
Yeah.
But this was a big one. I was like, oh, yeah. Okay. Practice what you preach, girl. But here's what happened is that this is why I say gratitude builds fortitude, is that mental resilience, those lows aren't as low and they aren't as long.
Yeah.
So the lows aren't as catastrophically, emotionally catastrophic, right? You're going to dip. You're going to feel me. It was a divorce. I felt it. I felt it a lot.
Yeah.
Right. But that low wasn't as low. And then it also wasn't as long. Like the process of, so many people in divorces. I mean, it's a lot, right? It's not just the divorce. It's the grieving. It's the, missing your partner and losing your partner. And then all the like legal stuff and the financial stuff and the, the families apart and, everything. And then moving and, all of this stuff. For those 6 months that I was, before, during, and after, guess how many times I got sick?
I hope it's none.
0.
Yeah.
And I can say all the things, I can talk about gratitude, but that right there is a testament.
Yes.
Of how gratitude, when gratitude is at the top of the food chain, it talking about owning, gratitude owns your immune cycle at that point, or gratitude owns your immune system at that point.
Yes.
And that's when the cycle is in your favor. That is when you can say, you know what, I could go through a divorce and I didn't get sick. Yeah, I had some days that I was tired and some days that I was rough and some days I was in the field and days I had tears. Like it's a divorce. It's a human experience. But being able to look at it from a place of coming out on the other side with happiness, with joy. I mean, I learned, I woke up during that whole process with more love and joy in my heart every single day. And it just kept growing. And I said, this is amazing because it's easy to be grateful when things are good.
Yeah.
But when the tough times hit, like that's really when that gratitude is put to the test. I have episode 74. If anyone is going through a divorce, I encourage you to listen to it because it goes through the whole methodology that I used to create not just a no conflict divorce, but to be able to go out on the other side with a ton more love and happiness and joy in my heart, to have that naturally. And people are like, what is wrong with you? I mean, in a good way. They're like,
yeah,
you're
why
not
aren't
supposed to go to you're supposed to be bitter and angry and resentful and all the things. And I was like, I mean, yeah, I was in the feels a bit, but
yeah,
it was so much better.
I love that you recognize that there will be dips, right? Because I think people, anything, once you start to change and you transform the way you think about things, I think there's this thought out there that people, you see a lot of it, you see it represented by people, that you'll never feel that way again. You'll never go through that again. Once you do this, you'll master it. Well, sure, but you're human. You're still going to go through those highs and lows and have dips. But the important part, as you talk about, is you are able to get through it with a completely different perspective. I think it's also important the way you embrace that. It's another thing. It's another lesson. What can I get out of it? And I also think we get to this point where we recognize we've been through things before, whatever they are. We're all different. We have different journeys, but we've all gone through crap, right? Life's complicated. And once you can really get your head around the fact that, well, other things are going to happen, but I'm going to get through them. I'm going to be okay. or it's going to end how it's supposed to end, right? And just learn to really embrace that moment and where you are, and to your point, find the good things in the situation that you can get out
Yeah.
of it or that are around you.
And that's why I love helping women so much really create their comeback story, because so often, we're going through the thing. You're like, I just wish, even if it's not anything tragic, even if it's just life, right? And all the demands. And you're like, I just wish I could go back to that place where life was simpler, where I was X, Y, and Z. And you kind of look at yourself and you're like, I just lost my sparkle. I've lost my happiness. Like, I want to go back to that place. And I like to say no, because that place was what got you here in the first place, right? Like, we want to take everything that we've learned and really create that place of you being the best version of you, and not from that overachieving perspective, but from that place of alignment and sparkle and happiness, and live from that place instead.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I think that there are so many women that get to this point, and I hear it over and over and over and over. And what you just said, it's people start waking up, women start waking up, and they're like, how did I get here? And it might not be a traumatic event. A lot of times it is.
Yeah.
But then they struggle with, how do I get out of here? What are those next steps that I do to start on that
Right.
path of not trying to go back to where I was, but to creating something new? I mean, what are some tips that you would give to people that you're working with that are in that situation?
Absolutely. I'm really glad you asked that, Marianne. And I like to say to meet gratitude where gratitude is at, and let gratitude meet you where you're at. So like I said, it's easy to be grateful when everything's going great. But during the tough times, you're like, I kind of don't want to be grateful. So it's number one, it's the small hinges that open the big doors. But the way that I like to teach it is from a personality based approach to gratitude. So it's based off of Dr. Robert Rome's DISC methodology, if you're familiar with that. So everyone's like, make a list of 3 things. Well, there's 25% of us who are list makers. We're going to get to that at the end. But what happens is you've got your individuals who are the doers, the more dominant, the lead following, get out of my way, the I always want to be first, I always want to be successful, right? Those are my attitudes of gratitudes. And if that's you, I like to say, think of gratitude like as like challenging yourself. Like, you're going to compete with gratitude every day. And from a fun perspective, right? Not from a bad competition, but from a fun perspective. Like, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, where is my gratitude today? Okay, what does it take to get it 1 point higher tomorrow? Right. And just have that little competition with yourself, because that's what drives that personality. And then you have what I call the gratitude glitterati's. Like, there are my people who are just, life is a party. Life is always fun.
Cheerleaders.
The cheerleaders. Like, I always want to be around people. I always want to be the life of the party. And so for you, make gratitude fun in whatever that looks like. And you're probably going to want to involve people too. So involve your sister, your bestie, or your spouse, or your partner, or your kids, or, make it fun. And then number 3 is my heart of gratitudes. You're the ones who are more quiet. You're the ones who, when your friend calls to cancel the plans, in 0.3 seconds, you're in your comfy pants with a book. So for you, you want to just take one gratitude and feel it deep. Just go into all the 5 senses, how it feels, how you see it, how you smell it, how you can touch it. Like, just go really deep with that one gratitude. And then finally, the 25% who actually are list makers, and I call them my gratitude list makers, right? For you, that list is going to light you up. You're the people who, like, brain's a lot more analytical, and you have routines. You like things very precise. Your spices are in ABC order, and woe be it to the person who puts them out of order, puts them back, right? So for you, right, you may want to create an Excel spreadsheet. You may want to create a Google spreadsheet and track your gratitudes and see, okay, this is what was going on in my life today. This is how grateful I was on a scale of 1 to 10. What does tomorrow look like? And then track that over time. So those are different ways. I actually have a really fun quiz that people can take to learn their gratitude personality. And it's just a fun way to get started, because so often when, we hear that like, oh, gratitude, gratitude. Well, what else am I supposed to do other than making a list of 3 things? Well, think about your personality and then think what lights you up. And then that's how you get started. And you can think of a million different ways within those personalities.
I love that. And I've not heard that twist before, but it makes so much sense because everybody's not the same and we don't learn the same. We don't operate the same. So really trying to lean into the right method that will help support you.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important. That's a really great twist.
And I think like there's a piece of all of them in all of us. It's just, 1 or 2 are going to be a little bit more dominant. So yeah.
I mean, that's the case with the personality thing too, right? I mean, it's always a little bit of this and that. So one of the questions that I really like to ask people in whatever space they're in is what surprises you? So you're now all in on this gratitude journey and everything you do. I mean, it's your brand, it's your life, it's what you live and breathe and talk about all the time and teach people. What surprises you in doing that work?
What surprises me, what's actually coming up is having gone through all of this and thinking that my life is far from perfect, but when you do the inner work and you do the healing and you kind of go through all of this, you kind of have a sense of invincibility. And a couple months ago, I got triggered big time. And what I realized was there were still some open wounds. And what I realized was, and it's funny because I teach it, but like living it.
Yeah, it's different.
It's a little different. It's good for everyone else, but it is a journey. It is a journey. And I needed that to really remind me that it is a journey. Yeah. Like, it's not just, we're going to wake up one day and be grateful all the time, or we're going to wake up one day and be healed, or we're going to wake up one day and have that inner healing. Like, no, it is a journey.
Yeah.
And those times where we get triggered or when this stuff happens, that's when you can put up that mirror and say, okay, what else do I need to work on?
Yeah.
Why is this happening? What are the lessons that I get to learn? And the growth that I had from that moment was exponential. So I could have decided to just be triggered and, let it consume me, let it own me. But instead I was like, no, I'm going to put up the mirror and I'm going to do the hard work and the hard reflections and see what comes out. But it is a journey. It is a journey. Just when you think that you've made progress, it's ugly and it's messy. And that's why life is so much fun.
Well, you did make progress. I think it's once you think you're beyond it, you think you're to the other side, but I think there is no other side.
Exactly.
I hear that a lot in the weight loss world, right? I think a lot of people, well, once you get to the other side or once you've lost the weight, it's, all unicorns and rainbows. Well, I can tell you it's not. And it is a journey, whatever it is, all of these different things, they will keep creeping up into your life. We've been programmed a certain way for X amount of years. It doesn't just click, it's gone. It doesn't happen like that, right? But I think that's part of the lesson is recognizing it will pop up. There will be more lessons and you can handle them.
Absolutely.
You have the tools in your toolbox to handle them. That's the thing people need to
Absolutely. And that's what mental resilience is all about is just gathering those tools. And each time something happens, you're like, oh, I've got another tool to pick from.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it. What a great conversation. I want to just remind everybody that I will, of course, put all your links in the show notes, but to check out your podcast, right? I think listening to Gratitude is Fortitude, there's a lot of lessons in there. I know I did some research, of course, before we got together. It's really filled with all kinds of messages and it'll add to the tools in the toolbox. So thanks for putting that out into the world. And I encourage people to go check it out. Is there anything else we didn't hit on that you want to just throw out there that we didn't get a chance to circle around on?
Oh, Marianne, this was such a great interview. I really appreciate your time. I think we've covered everything. And I just love to connect with your listeners and really grateful for this time.
Oh, thanks so much. Thank you. This has been great. Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.